This is a very, very brief summary of the Unabomber's manifesto, which is 100 pages in a paperback. That's the manifesto, okay? So it's quite thick. That's 100 paperback pages. And he says it's already too short. So he considers he's got a big argument, and I think he has. I don't think he's infallible, and I don't think he's a saint, but I do think he's interesting, and I do think he's got a point. Let's just read the very, very brief summary. Modern society, this is 2 paragraphs from the bottom of page 1 of this letter. Modern society is destroying human dignity and freedom by its industrial technology. Machines are dehumanizing. A symptom of this destruction is the modern left-winger or leftist, a type of man recurring in numerous protest movements today, often himself belonging to no minority group. In other words, he's not a black, he's not even a woman, he's not a lesbian, he's not a Jew or anything like that. He's a WASP, but nevertheless, in the name of a variety of such groups, he attacks Western civilization with a hostility, betraying his lack of real compassion for the supposed victims. In other words, your leftist pretends to be sympathizing with Jews and blacks or homosexuals or whatever, and he's not really. These things are all an instrument to get at Western civilization. Why does he want to get at Western civilization? The Unabomber doesn't know. You and I know. Because Western civilization betrayed God a long way back up here. And what the Unabomber in paragraph 1 is in fact observing, he doesn't understand, because he's not the fifth. He doesn't understand what's going on, but what he's in fact observing is the globe turning against people. In other words, baby seals hug a tree of the ozone layer, being used, actually it's still the blacks and the Jews being used, or the handicapped, or all of these, the minority groups are being used as a lever to destroy what still remains of Christian civilization. Because your leftist says this layer is no good, and he's right, to quite an extent, because this layer is a long way down from the Catholic Church, and it represents several betrayals that have already taken place. So your leftist is attacking, well, what is he attacking in the name of? He can't attack in the name of the king, because that's tyranny. He can't attack in the name of the aristocracy, because that's elitism. He can't attack in the name of the middle class, because that's capitalism. So he's got to attack in the name of trees, baby seals, and those, and your blacks and Jews. So he's right down here. That's what your leftist is in fact doing. The Unabomber can't see that. But he doesn't belong to a minority group, but your leftist, says Kaczynski, goes through this false association with minority groups as a means of getting back at, quote-unquote, Western civilization. And he does it with a hostility which betrays that he's not really interested or sympathetic with blacks, Jews, and homosexuals. He really wants to destroy what remains of Western civilization. Nor can his revolt be so real against society when he wishes to integrate them into it. That's another thing. The man's smart. See? Because he wants blacks. He's saying blacks are scorned and trodden on or walked all over. We want blacks back into society. Hey, I thought you said society was no good. Well, why do you want to pull blacks into it then? So he's picking up the contradiction which there are in these left-wingers. He's saying leftists are junk. He's right. And he says that's a symptom. Leftists are then a major, the malady of leftism is a symptom of the sickness of modern society. And he's going to blame the sickness of modern society on industrial technology. In truth, point 2, the industrial technological system, IT, or IT for short, makes it so easy for men to satisfy their basic needs of food, clothing, and shelter that man's equally natural need to attain some goal by serious effort on his own part remains widely frustrated. He's right again. In the old days, you didn't have kids wandering all over the streets and getting frustrated and drive-by shooting and visiting rotten cinemas and getting You didn't have that in the old days. Because the boys had to work on the land, because if they didn't work on the land, then their mother would starve in February or March. The hard grind and discipline of farm work meant the boys just didn't get mixed up, and the girls didn't get mixed up either. The girls had no washing machines, so they had to stay home and make the farmhouse turn, wash all the men's clothes when the men were out working all day in the fields. Therefore, there was an interaction and a necessity and a harsh grind of life which stopped them getting all out of shape. There's a very amusing thing said about Jewish immigrants. They used to land in Brooklyn, and then, of course, they moved inland to sort of the posh parts of New Jersey. And the Jew is quoted in New Jersey as saying, you know, when we landed from the old world in Brooklyn, we were far too miserable to think of committing suicide. That's it. But now that we're rich and idle and leisured in New Jersey, and we've got beautiful homes, we all think of committing suicide. As long as we were miserable, we were quite happy. Now that we're completely happy, we're all miserable. That's it. That's it. And that's what the Unabomber is saying. He's saying that a man doesn't only need food and clothing and so on. He also needs to do something with purpose in his life, to feel that he's got a contribution to make, to feel that what he's doing counts. And that what he's doing counts tends to be destroyed by the huge combine harvesters, which with a jaw as wide as this room, go through one field in a few hours and feed the whole village for the whole winter. There's a trade-off for these magnificent machines. And it's all very well having a magnificent combine harvester which will feed the village for the whole winter in a few hours, but the trade-off is that the boys are going to be, you're going to create welfare bums. If you didn't have huge harvesters, you couldn't have welfare bums, because the welfare bums would all be out picking cotton. They'd have to be, because they have to make a living and put food on the table. So the trade-off of these huge machines is a leisure which a lot of people don't know how to use, and actually the destruction of a lot of people's sense of their own value. Because I don't have to work for my living. I do green stamps and welfare, it's all done for me.
Well, it's not only they mustn't work, but they cannot work for a living because they're not harvesting. There's a book out recently.
He says the same thing. Also, family, or any such small-scale loyalty natural to man, and he means then the local village. Man, that the Unabomber realizes that man naturally lives in little communities. He lives in a family, then the family lives on a block, and the block is part of a village or is part of a street, and the Unabomber realizes that men need that. But he says, any such small-scale loyalty is necessarily disrupted by the large-scale commitment required for industrial technology to function. It's very smart. Let's stop and think for a moment. Here I've got a factory mass producing, I think this is his example, mass producing, let's say, shoes. And because I produce so many of them, I produce them very cheaply. But if I produce in Cleveland, Ohio, a massive amount of shoes, I've got to get them out to all parts of the country. In other words, there's got to be distribution. For the shoes to be produced so cheaply, the lorry driver, the truck drivers have got to get them out. The truck drivers mustn't go on strike. The truck drivers have got to be in sync with the factory. And then the retailers have got to be in sync with the truck drivers, in sync with the factory. The huge scale production requires the smooth running of a huge machine. Therefore, he says, that's what he means by the large scale commitment. Industrial technology requires a large-scale commitment in order to work. He says one refrigerator requires steel, it requires Freon, a factory producing Freon or something like it. It requires somebody to get it, to move it across the country. It requires a whole lot of things that you don't think of when the refrigerator is just standing there. But behind one refrigerator stands a whole system, a whole wide-scale and big system, all of which is necessary for one refrigerator to operate. Added to which, of course, you need a whole local electric power station. Yeah, so Industrial technology destroys family values. Because you have to put loyalty to the big system over loyalty to my little village. Otherwise, the big system is just not going to work. And therefore, the big system is at war with the little systems. And if you put all your faith and money into the big systems, it's going to necessarily destroy the little systems. So, when people say, we want the family, we want family values, we want the family, we want family values, and then in the next breath say, but we want mass-produced goods which are all very cheap so that we have a nice, soft, comfortable way of life, the Unabomber says such people are contradicting themselves without realizing it. They are wanting a whole lot of things which undermine what on the other side they also think they want. And so the whole system of American life, for instance, tends to the destruction of the family. So that when poor Americans stand up and say, I want to defend my family, I believe in family values, I want to defend my family, nearly always the same Americans, 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 or 15 minutes later, will be speaking up for technology or speaking up for industry or speaking up for something which undermines the very family that they've just said that they wanted to defend. So there is always a trade-off. And the trade-off of industrial technology is expensive. Exactly the same things happening in Europe. In Europe, decent Englishmen are saying, we want England. Decent Germans, patriotic Germans, are saying, we want the sovereignty of Germany. Decent Frenchmen are saying, we want old-fashioned Catholic France. But a quarter of an hour later, that same Englishman, the same German, and the same Frenchman are all saying, but we also want the nice life which is provided by European-scale production. But the moment you speak up for European-scale production, so that the shoes come from Spain, the tomatoes come from Italy, the razors come from Holland, the beef comes from England, whatever it is, the moment you want wide-scale production, with all the bananas coming from Ireland, whatever it may be, you've necessarily got to put Europe first. And so these dear Europeans who... The dear Europeans who on the one hand want to defend their own country, on the other hand want the soft, inexpensive and easy life, they're contradicting themselves without realizing it. If you want a nice sovereign country, you've got to pay the price, which is less manufactured, soft, inexpensive goods. If you want these soft, inexpensive, easily available, mass-produced goods, you've got to say sooner or later, bye-bye to national sovereignty. Take your pick. You pays your money, you takes your choice, but you can't have it both ways. The Unabomber sees it, and he's a smart man. And he says, you can't have both industrial technology, nationwide industrial technology, and the family. You can't have it both ways. You're going to have to take your pick. Therefore, it destroys family values. Similarly, the host of rules and regulations imposed by the functioning of industrial technology stifle man's acting on his own part to attain real goals, which is what the Unabomber says is his real freedom. And therefore, according to the Unabomber, not only is industrial technology against the family, industrial technology is also against liberty. You see, he's got this liberty bug, but there's something in it, there's something in it. 3, nor can any minor adjustment or compromise reconcile industrial technology with freedom, both because industrial technology has to regulate human behavior closely in order to function at all, and because all parts of industrial technology are interdependent. That's something he proves in detail. Take, for example, a steel mill. As you know, a steel mill has to keep hot all the time. It takes a long time to heat up a steel oven, and once you've got it hot, you have to keep it moving. In other words, you're going to have workers all around the clock. For workers to work the first shift, you're going to have workers on the second shift, you'll have to have workers on the third shift, and if one of the shift workers drops out, the oven cools off, and the other shift workers are all in trouble. You have to step into the system and make part of the system and obey the system for the system to operate. Whereas when you're running your own little farm with your own little horses, independent of anybody else's farm, you don't have to worry about what anybody else is doing on their farm. The working unit is just your little farm. The working unit, at the very most, your little village. But industrial technology means that your working unit is either the whole country or the whole continent. And in Europe, it's getting dramatic, because the national sovereignties of these famous old nations is going under, and it's going under the wheels of the juggernaut of industrial technology. Sorry, let's wait until the end. Well, I must lay out what the Unabomber thinks, and then we'll be wide open. All parts of IT are interdependent. For instance, the refrigerator manufacturers absolutely require electricity, and the electricity absolutely requires somebody to produce machines which need the electricity. The whole thing interlocks. On a massive scale, the whole thing has to interlock. You can't deny it. You just can't deny it. And there's always a trade-off, but if you have the nationwide technology, there's a serious loss as far as the family is concerned. And he argues why. He argues, the man thinks. Moreover, men's desire for industrial technology and for the benefits of industrial technology has for a long time been proving stronger than their desire for freedom, for a variety of reasons. So that the advance of industrial technology seems to many people to be irreversible. I'm sure it seems to many of you to be irreversible. For instance, interesting example. The use of a motor car was originally optional. When motor cars first arrived, you could have one or you could not have one. You didn't have to have one. But then, after a while that the motor cars had been here, especially in the United States, the cities were laid out in function of the motor car. The suburbs immediately began spreading out much wider, and in order to go to the shops, you need a motor car. In the old-fashioned towns and villages, like in New England, you can walk to the shops, or the houses you could walk to the shops, but no longer. Today the mall is 5 or 10 minutes away in a motor car, and everybody thinks nothing of jumping into the motor car and driving to the mall to buy. But you need a motor car to get to the mall. Sometimes they often don't even have pavements or walkways any longer to get from the suburbs or the homes to the shopping malls. And if you walk from your home to the shopping mall, the police car comes by to ask what you're doing, because you're a strange creature if you're still on your 2 feet. In other words, originally the use of a motor car was optional, but the motor car, the very motor car, so changed the layout of cities that now you have to have a motor car. Therefore, he argues, industrial technology will be stopped by no small-scale reform, but only wholesale revolution. So he's wanting another revolution to break up the industrial technology establishment. Admit, the man's got some brains. 4. The clash between industrial technology and human freedom is highlighted by industrial technology's present pursuit of ways to tame wild behavior. For instance, the control of schooling, the control of parenting, drugs. What's the famous one that they're giving to kids? Begins with an R, Ritonol or something. Ritalin. Psychotherapy, neurology, genetics. Eventually, it's just around the corner, brain engineering. These are all forms of manipulation by which industrial technology will, if it can, re-engineer the very nature of man in order to fit industrial technology. He's right. In other words, the tail is wagging the dog. Man has created industrial technology to serve him, but now man is going to be changed in order to serve and to fit industrial technology. That's what's happening. It's happening right around us. And you see the constant, we give the kids drugs because they're not fitting into our wonderful schools, or they're not fitting into our wonderful way of life. Or my wife is considering that I'm a son of a, well, I need to send her to the psychotherapist because she's got the problem. No, maybe she hasn't. Maybe you're the problem. Maybe all of these kids that misfit modern society, maybe they're not misfits, maybe it's the society that's the misfit. You listen to these rock singers. I mentioned in this thing that I mentioned Pink Floyd. You listen to these rock singers, they're in pain. And they're in pain in modern society. We don't need no education. We don't need no thought control. They're complaining at the schools because the school system is processing and brainwashing. The school system is denying these kids their value and importance as human beings. It's wanting to turn them into machines. It's wanting to turn them into computer nerds. And a marvelous sentence of his is that he says, the teachers in today's schools are too busy taking knives and guns away from the kids to have the time to turn them into computer nerds. It's well said. Very well said. Because the kids don't want to be turned into computer nerds. What do the kids want? They don't know. They don't know what they want. All they know is that they don't want modern society. I'm not saying the kids are saints or angels. But I'm saying that modern society has got a lot of things deeply wrong. And that Unabomber, even without the faith, is intelligent enough to be on the tail of these things that modern society's got wrong. What's happening is, this is where we're connecting with the encyclicals. The Catholic Church understands human nature as God made it. But the Masons are wanting to change human nature. They're wanting to bend, they're wanting to substitute God's nature with a new nature of their own. But the new nature, the new world, the new technological world, the new machine world that they're producing to change human nature doesn't fit human nature. And so the poor kids are squealing and yelling because they know it doesn't fit. Then the kids reach the age of 20 and they flip. The kids flip. The kids say, well, I'm being offered a nice cushy job with 50,000 a year, and there's a sweet chick here, so I'll settle for a ticky-tacky house, a ticky-tacky wife, a ticky-tacky car, a ticky-tacky salary, and I will have a ticky-tacky happiness, and then my kids, I know, will listen to rock and roll when they grow up, but I know that they'll grow out of it just like I grew out of it. What kind of a world is that? So, all of these things are forms of manipulation by which industrial technology will, if it can, re-engineer the very nature of man in order to fit industrial technology. The tail is going to wag. The tail is already wagging the dog. We've got a deep human problem, and the Unabomber is killing people in order to wake people up to the problem. I'm not saying he's right. I'm not saying he's right. But the man is so frustrated at trying to get through with a serious message to people who will not be got through to, that he's resorting to killing in order to get through. Presently, more and more humans are rising up in revolt against industrial technology. But if industrial technology prevails, not even the rulers, the manipulators, the guys in control of industrial technology will have much freedom to move. Okay, and that's very true. I'm sitting on top of this machine, which is crushing everybody else. But I've got to stay in the cabin of this machine, and I've got to keep watching all of these controls, otherwise I'm not going to be sitting here any longer. The machine will, somebody else will take my place, I'll lose control. They will stop being crushed, and then I will get crushed with everybody else. So the machine crushes the people underneath it in one way, and it crushes the people driving it in another. It's a triumph of the devil, an absolute triumph of the devil. Everybody is being dehumanized. Everybody's getting crushed. If IT wins, then not even the drivers of the IT will have much freedom to move. Whereas, if IT is smashed, that's the Unabomber's dream, there may be chaos, but at least humanity will have another chance. And the chaos may cause less suffering than the continuance of our industrial technology will cause. Poof. Man. And he argues every point of the way. 5. Because if IT survives, if industrial technology survives, then the future looks grim. Because he's got various alternatives. If IT is not broken up and smashed, if we don't take sledgehammers to the whole industrial technology way of life, if IT continues, there are various alternatives. Either for the sake of efficiency, machines will be in total control and no man will have any freedom at all left. Or an elite will still be in control, an elite will be running the master machines, and then there are again two alternatives. The elite will run the master machines in such a way as to eliminate the masses so that a few are in control while the rest are dead. Or they will run the machines so as to tame the masses, domesticate the masses, so that the few are chained to the machine. They've got to stay in the driving seat and keep pushing on the buttons, while the rest have no freedom or meaning in their lives. If IT survives, whichever way, man will have to be re-engineered beyond all recognition. In other words, it's either IT or man. Take your pick. That's what he's arguing. It's a strong argument. 6. However, IT is not unstoppable. We can throw a monkey wrench in the works. The positive alternative that we need, now this is where is wild nature. This is why he went off to live in a cabin in Montana. Free of men or with wild men. So he's back to destroying human beings. He's got no answer. He's got no real answer. He sees the problem. He's very good at the problem. But without the faith, he's got no idea of how to put it together again or how to get out of it. So his answer is logical. Since industrial technology is the problem, then we've got to go back to the wilds. And he had that little cabin in the middle of Montana, in the middle of nowhere. What's the advantage of wild nature? It's completely non-technological, you know, adders and ferns and bushes and rivers and streams and mountains and clouds. It's non-technology, it's beautiful, it takes care of itself, it permits survival living. One may have toothaches, but rather toothaches are better than industrial technology. The means of overthrowing IT are a revolution which will be not merely political, but economic, technological, and worldwide, because IT cannot be overthrown piecemeal. So he's dreaming of a massive worldwide uprising against the machine. Above all, let our revolutionaries, so he wants another revolution. We've had 1, 2, 3, 4, so he wants a 5th revolution. It's all the same thing. Because IT cannot be overthrown piecemeal. Above all, let our revolutionists have the one clear goal: IT must go, IT must go, IT must go. All means to achieve that goal can then be pragmatically adjusted. And he talks like Lenin, you know, he talks like a communist. And he says, we need a revolution, and the revolutionists need to fix on the goal and then adapt all the means. That's exactly what Lenin used to say. 7, finally. Let our revolutionists not mix with leftists who are as anti-individualist as IT is. And so the leftists will only oppose IT in order then to use it against everybody else. He knows leftists inside out. So he hates industrial technology, and then he hates leftists, and he wants to go back to wild nature. It's just another non-solution, in fact. But he's right, as so often, all the way down. He's right about the defects of the previous establishment. Henry VIII was wrong, because Henry VIII was attacking the Catholic Church. But all of the others are more or less right in what they're attacking. Also, leftists habitually collaborate in revolutions with non-leftists only to double-cross them later. Leftism is totalitarian by nature. In fact, it is a substitute religion, the need to believe in which will make even decent followers condone the most indecent crimes from their leaders. And so he started with the delinquency of leftism, and he finishes with the delinquency of leftism. So he knows that leftism is no answer. He's protesting against leftism. He's protesting against the socialists of FDR, the welfare socialists of FDR, and their welfare state, their industrial technological welfare state. And he's another stage down. Poor fellow, if only he could, you know, get back to the faith. Well, all right, now, what would anybody... That's a very brief summary of what the Unabomber says.
Essa foi uma conferência do falecido Monsieur Williamson, dada no Seminário da Fraternidade nos anos 80, e nós subscrevemos integralmente a sua análise a respeito das consequências da Revolução Industrial na civilização, especialmente entre o povo católico. Monsieur Williamson era dotado de grandes opiniões a respeito de história, política. Ele tinha mesmo um veio raditrade, um veio tradicionalista em questões mais seculares. Mas é uma lástima que ele tenha tido grandes e gravíssimos defeitos de ordem teológica e moral. Então, por essas razões todas, eu acredito e tenho a opinião de que o Monsieur Williamson é um dos melhores e mais combativos bispos no inferno nesse exato momento. É uma pena que não dá para presumir coisas melhores a respeito disso. Mas aquilo que há de bom em sua vida, nós aproveitaremos com toda certeza. Se você quer saber mais sobre essa questão, esse assunto da Revolução Industrial e sua consequência na civilização, eu recomendo que você se inscreva no canal e se prepare para os próximos vídeos durante a semana e que você assista também a conferência que eu tive com o reverendo padre Langdoni a respeito da impossibilidade de ser católico nos centros urbanos. Se você gosta do nosso conteúdo, recomendo você se inscrever no canal, ativar o sininho de notificações, deixar o seu like. E quem quiser conhecer mais sobre a face oculta, a verdadeira cara de Monsieur Williamson, eu vou deixar um card aqui em cima para que vocês assistam e descubram se vocês ainda não estão por dentro dos assuntos. Também aqui na descrição.